You're listening to Science and Spirituality with Deepak Chopra.
Hi, you guys.
Hi.
Good to see you. My name is John Horgan. I'm a veteran science journalist, and I also teach at Stevens Institute of Technology, which is right up the road from me here in Hoboken. And we're here today to discuss this brand new book written by Deepak Chopra, Jack Tuszynski, and Brian Fertig. And I'm hoping we can provide an overview of the book. I've read it, and I really like the book. I think it's very timely, and it brings together a lot of fascinating information on the connection of quantum mechanics to all sorts of things. But I'm hoping that the co-authors can tell us something about it, tell people who haven't read the book why they should read it. So I'm going to start by asking people just to give brief introductions. Deepak, I think we can skip you. Everybody knows who you are. But I'll start with Jack. So Jack, where are you and what are you?
That's a good question. Well, I'm currently in Edmonton, Alberta. I'm a professor of biophysics at the University of Alberta, where I've been for more than 3 decades. I also teach at the Technical University of Turin in Italy in the Department of Biomedical Engineering. And my interests have varied over the years. I started out in sort of mainstream quantum physics, physics of phase transitions, critical phenomena. I gradually moved into nonlinear dynamics. And I always was interested in biology, but biology was maybe not interested in me. It was not really suitable for serious physics investigations. Now it's different. That since the past maybe 20, 25 years, biology has become a very complex, interesting, fascinating science. So I moved to biophysics about 2 decades ago. And from there on, I spent 15 years in the Department of Oncology at the Cross Cancer Institute here, doing computational drug discovery for various types of cancer. And then in the last 3 years, actually, I moved toward investigations of electromagnetic interactions with biological systems. So it's a real fusion of physics and biology. That's in a nutshell what I've been doing the past 2.5, 3 decades.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I can see why Deepak wanted you to be a co-author on this book. So Brian, who are you, and you are where right now?
I'm in Piscataway, New Jersey, and Edison and Broadway Central, New Jersey, a number of hospitals, and I'm on staff at HMH, Hackensack Meridian Hospital. It's a network in JFK, and a few hospitals with Robert Wood as well. I'm an academic associate professor with HMH and with the medical school, and a clinical associate professor with Robert Wood. You know, I'm an endocrinologist and a clinical endocrinologist, but I enjoy the academia and I enjoy the fusion with physics and now with the spiritual domain. It's incredibly fascinating.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to come back to both you guys, but let me ask Deepak now, why this book and why now?
It's a long story, John. You've gotten to know me a little bit. So I trained in neuroendocrinology with Seymour Reichlen in the 1970s, mid 1970s. Seymour Reichlen, who's now 97 years old and in good health. If he catches a snake in his garden, he would look for neuropeptides in the midbrain, even today. And he argues about consciousness with me, who I'm, of course, one of his students. And he's a luminary to me. So in the 1970s, when people were not familiar with words like serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin and opiates, one of my colleagues, Candice Burt, who was training at Georgetown with another great endocrinologist, George Solomon, she said, we were looking under the microscope at some molecules, and she said, these are the molecules of emotion. And that struck me. And I became a fan of what we now call mind-body medicine, integrative medicine, and looking at these molecules that whatever happened in consciousness obviously had some effects in biology, because there were receptors to these molecules all over the body. And then the question arose, there are receptors, but also the body makes the same molecules that the brain makes in response to emotional experience. So I got interested in where is the mind? Is it in the brain or is it in the body? And then I got even deeper into Eastern wisdom traditions. They said consciousness is not in the brain or in the body. The body and brain are experiences in consciousness. And consciousness is non-local. It doesn't have location in space-time. It doesn't have any form. It cannot be accessed through a system of thought, but it is what makes all experience possible, whether it's mental experience, biological experience. So I've been basically on the road for 35 years, 53 years now, if I think about it, since I left medical school, just obsessed with consciousness and the mystery of our existence. And, I've created these models that have been ridiculed by the mainstream. But then, I met Jack a few years ago at the Science of Consciousness. And Jack has worked with luminaries like Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. We published a paper together on zinc metabolism in the brain and Alzheimer's. So Jack became very close friends. Then through Jack, I met Brian, realized that he's written these two amazing, magnificent volumes on quantum metabolism. So I thought maybe, if I partnered with them, we could bring these ideas to the mainstream medical as well as the physics establishment. As Jack said, physics has not been interested in biology, but if the physical world ultimately is quantum in nature and our body is part of the physical world, then our body has to be part of, it has to be quantum in nature. I don't have the science that say these two gentlemen have, because they're very much more still in academia. But we did this book because we thought it was timely. Mind-body medicine is accepted. Epigenetics is accepted. The fact that experiences change our biology is accepted. But we still don't know where experiences happen. They don't happen in the brain. There's no experience in the brain. You can put a knife through the brain and there's no subjective experience of that. So the brain records the neural correlates of experience. But, where experience happens is a fundamental mystery of our existence, and has been talked about from Plato to Aristotle to, to recent times now, Sir Roger Penrose. And so that's why I thought this would be a great partnership to do this book with these two really solid academics who know much more about the math of quantum physics. I know that John is a student of quantum mechanics. He's been studying the math aspect of it, which, is kind of mind-boggling. But right now, as I go on things like ChatGPT and AI, and I ask questions like, is morphogenesis and differentiation quantum mechanical? Is intentionality quantum mechanical? Is sensory processing quantum mechanical? Is motor activity quantum mechanical? And I get support for these ideas that I never knew that there was support for them, but now it seems slowly mainstream medicine and mainstream physics is moving in the direction of a more fundamental reality, which is even beyond quantum. I would say the formless consciousness in which we all participate, including this conversation. To me, it's mind-boggling that this conversation is being processed in consciousness which has no location in space-time.
It's also being enabled by quantum technologies, which seems appropriate. Jack, there's so many questions I could ask you, but what is the main takeaway that you want people to have from this book? What message did you really want to deliver in this collaboration? Oh, Jack, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
There's a lot to say about this. From my perspective, my motivation in a way was to encourage the interrogation of this of the human body, the human mind, from different angles, not just physics, not just biophysics, not just medicine or cell biology, but in an integrated fashion. I think it was a great opportunity for me to work with Brian and with Deepak, because they bring different perspectives. And another thing is that historically, when you look back at things like quantum mechanics, the beginning of quantum physics more than a century ago, it happened very rapidly, and it took over the field of physics after 350 years of classical thinking, deterministic thinking. And I think I see historical parallels, because what changed everything for physics were several experiments, only several unexplained experiments. The first one, of course, was the black body radiation that Max Planck explained sort of against his own convictions, still being rooted in classical physics, right? And now I see similar things in biology, and we actually jumped to medicine, where, of course, the consequences of this kind of thinking will be seen. So in biology, we have a lot of conviction that everything is driven by diffusion, by chemical reactions, binary reactions. But Deepak mentioned embryology and morphology, form, and integration, synchronization of these. It cannot be explained by this kind of classical thinking. It simply cannot. And in addition to this, there are some concrete examples where we now know that quantum effects are harnessed by biology. For example, the photosynthesis, which is the beginning of all energy processes in all life forms. We start with the energy from the sun, light rays, photons, striking the surfaces of leaves, and chlorophyll absorbs it and transforms into electronic degrees of freedom. And that down the road creates glucose, and then, of course, plants become the food for animals and so on. So the food chain is based on quantum processes per se. And we went deeper, because metabolism in eukaryotic cells, in human cells, is also demonstrably quantum in nature from at least 2 points of view. The first one is that there is actual quantum tunneling of electrons in the electron transfer chain in mitochondria. This would not be possible by classical movement of charges. It has to be tunneling because of the potential barriers and so on. And the second thing, which is a bit less well known, and I guess this is how Brian approached me, because Brian was aware of these papers, unlike most of the doctors, I believe. No disrespect to doctors. I think they're fantastic professionals, but they don't need to know quantum metabolism yet. In the future, probably. So this is the second aspect, is so-called allometric scaling laws. Allometric scaling laws of physiology go back to 18th century, and they were studied by Lavoisier and French scientists, and then later on Kleiber in early 20th century cataloged it and found nonlinear dependence on size in the energy consumption and production. And that was never explained until recently, using actually scaling laws, which are used in quantum physics. That actually led to the Nobel Prize for Peter Debye in solid-state physics, explaining specific heats of solids. And now with Lloyd Demetrius, my colleague, who is at Harvard, and Max Planck, and myself, we wrote several papers which kind of explain these mathematically, and very, I would say, very elegantly. I'm not bragging here, but it's a very elegant explanation. So what I'm trying to say, and cut to the chase here, that there are several compelling stories about quantum effects in biology so far, that just like in physics 123 years ago, will change the way biology is perceived as a science, because it'll be this synchronization, coherence, and organizational perfection that Brian talks about a lot can only be explained, at least using current knowledge, by quantum mechanics. So that was my long explanation why I got into this, because I really think that that's the message that has to come across to a wider audience, and biologists first, medical doctors, I would say medical students, because I think these people will be the ones who transform the practice of medicine down the road.
All right. Thank you very much. I want to come back to you at some point and ask you if you have a favorite interpretation of quantum mechanics, because I've been writing about the debate over what quantum mechanics means for decades, and I'm more confused than ever. So maybe you can tell me what you think. So Brian, can you tell us what you really want to tell people, readers of this book? And also, I'm hoping you can say whether quantum medicine is a thing yet. Is it something in the process of being born, or is there something called quantum medicine right now?
Well, there's a lot to say there. Thank you, John. But let me just give a little backstory about why I've initially wrote this book, Metabolism in Medicine, and it was really for the purpose to try to better understand biological systems through the lens of physics and energy flow. And fortunately, I mean, it was also this lofty goal that could we advance medicine to find new frontiers that aren't in outer space, they're right here in our backyard. And so fortunately, very fortunately, I connected with Jack, and Jack is just an incredible intellect and talent. And by the way, Jack is a nominator for the Nobel Prize in Physics. He's been hired by a number of several countries in Europe to organize their science. And so not only did Jack edit the first volume of this book, but he guided the process of finding a transformative potential for the future of medicine, and a model which we call the physiological fitness landscape model. And it's able to predict and prevent the onset of disease and predict the patient response to therapeutic interventions. But biology, or quantum biology and quantum metabolism, is a natural intersection with mind, body, and the spiritual domain. And this led us to connect with Deepak, and ultimately the writing of Quantum Body. I don't have to tell you, John, that Deepak is just a great man on many, many levels. And first, I just want to say that it's such a proud feeling and privilege to share the front cover of this book with these two giants, great men. Now, in terms of what is ready for prime time, quantum biology in terms of medicine, when I was growing up, when we were all growing up and going to school, the most fundamental tier of medicine is or the life sciences with biochemistry. In the late 1990s, it became molecular biology. Now it's quantum biology, with an interest and a justification for the application of quantum biology to clinical medicine. Now, microtubules, based on the Penrose-Hameroff model of consciousness, appears to be vital in the storage and processing of consciousness, from which emotional and natural intelligence have emerged. And while disturbances of these microtubules appear critical for the pathogenesis of chronic disease, these are examples of the emerging role of quantum biology in medicine. I think these are beautiful examples of this, and it's only going to, not to mention the effect, the significance on mind, body, and mental focus, and the effects that this will have on health and healthcare. So I think that's another major, obvious application, which we're already using, and Deepak uses quite a bit with meditation and yoga and the like. And I think these are going to play an important role. But just think about the definition of consciousness from Sir Roger Penrose. Defines it as it's an awareness of perspectives. And this is necessary for understanding, to be able to connect dots of these different perspectives for creative insights. And this, in turn, is necessary for natural intelligence, which is the application, real world application to problem solving. And the application is, let me just finish up with the application of this from a healthcare perspective. And I think the natural intelligence that, or the emotional intelligence that healthcare practitioners must have involves an awareness of the perspectives, a robust, well-rounded perspectives of a medical topic, as well as of the patient, their fears or expectations or biases or belief systems. And to be able to harness this in the uniqueness of the individual patient for the optimal problem solving for that individual. So if you have, for example, an obese patient, you're going to have a prescription of that's going to be unique to the individual, various lifestyle changes with or without prescription agents, pharmacological agents, and which ones, and then with or without a bariatric surgery, which one. And it's going to be unique in terms of the optimal problem solving, given the patient and the uniqueness of that patient and the experience that patient has. So I think these are all examples, John, of where we're going with quantum, just the quantum biology, the understanding of where it evolves from. And not to belabor it, I'll just say, because I'm sure there'll be more opportunities to describe this, but I think my major interest is in the intersection of quantum metabolism with physiological perfection, and how it connects with consciousness, which in free will is the quantum biological expression of consciousness, as Deepak has described, and that really resonated with me. So, and there's many, I'll leave it at that, give you the others a chance.
John, before you ask your next question, I just want to share with you, these are 2 volumes I'm holding on quantum metabolism, the metabolic landscape of health and disease. And these are 2 volumes written by our friend Brian Fertig. I'm still struggling to understand much of the math and the deeper insights that he offers in these. And before I'm curious to hear Jack's favorite interpretation of quantum mechanics. But while you were having this conversation, I went online and I asked an AI chatbot about Erwin Schrödinger's interest in consciousness and Vedanta. As you know, Schrödinger's equation is the basis of all quantum mechanics. And this is what I found from his book, What is Life, 1944. Schrödinger wrote, "The Upanishads are the most comprehensive philosophical treatise ever written by man. They are based on an ancient idea, as old as Indian thought itself, that the most profound reality is one, and this one is identical with our own self. There's no room for a divided self in the Upanishads, no conflict between our true self and the outer world, no dichotomy between mind and matter." Schrödinger was particularly interested in the Vedantic concept of Atman, which is the eternal self or reality. He believed that the Atman is identical to the wave function in quantum mechanics. That to me was amazing, that Schrödinger was talking about consciousness and wave function as being identical with the one ultimate reality. And we now, all our physics is based on Schrödinger's equations, but actually if you say this in public amongst scientists today, they'll roll up their eyes. They say, what nonsense. But I'm just quoting from Schrödinger right now. So I'm curious, what is Jack's favorite interpretation? But go ahead, sorry to interrupt.
Okay. I want to get back to Jack, but I want to ask you a question now, Deepak. I'm going to push back a little bit against one of the big themes of your work for as long as I've known you, and even before that. And it's taking off from what Brian just said. It seems to me possible that you can have quantum medicine that remains entirely materialistic. There's just an understanding of quantum processes and how they're involved in metabolism, how they might be involved in neural activity. And you don't have to have any of the metaphysics about consciousness. You don't have to have the challenge to materialism that you mount in your own writing and your speeches and so forth. So do you think that's possible? Why do you need the metaphysics? Why do you need the idea that consciousness is somehow primary for quantum medicine to happen?
Well, on the one hand, I agree with you that you can have a materialistic paradigm for quantum mechanics and be done with it and not invoke anything that's mental or emotional or consciousness linked. But then, John, any look at reality that excludes mind or emotions or consciousness is not complete. I mean, even if we come up with a unified field theory, gravity, strong weak interactions, electromagnetism, that's the whole spiel. How does that give rise to intention or feeling or emotion or insight or intuition or creativity or higher consciousness or transcendence? So I've always been a student of Vedanta, as all my life. And so I'm always looking for ways to actually say that science without including consciousness is going to be incomplete. After all, even science is an activity in consciousness. Theories are conceived in consciousness. Experiments are designed in consciousness. And observations are made in consciousness. So, how can you have science without consciousness? So say that's my bias.
And one of the implications of what you just said is that while we're waiting for quantum medicine to emerge, there are these practices that we can engage in to actually improve our health, our mental health, and our physical health.
And all these practices include, influencing your autonomic nervous system. And during the COVID pandemic, it became very clear that people who were having high morbidity, high mortality, also had sympathetic overdrive, they had inflammatory storms, and yet no one was talking about the parasympathetic nervous system, which has been a fascination in the yogic traditions, how breathing, how yoga, how mindfulness, how reflection, how transcendence actually influence autonomic activity that counters the sympathetic overdrive. So now, because of neuroplasticity and epigenetics, we do know that every mental event influences our biology. And you're talking about quantum metabolism, this huge 2 volumes. My first insight into this happened as a resident. One day I was speaking to a patient and I said, Mr. whatever his name was, I said, I'm afraid you might have cancer. And as soon as I said that, I saw his face got crestfallen, his blood pressure rose. I'm sure his body metabolites showed inflammation and cytokines, heart rate went up. And then in the next minute, I realized that I'd made a mistake. I was reading the wrong chart. So I said, I'm so sorry, that wasn't your chart. You're perfectly healthy. That is somebody else's chart. And immediately his demeanor changed and his biology changed. And I said to myself, one little bit of information and its interpretation changed this guy's biology in few seconds from one thing to another. So I didn't have the expertise that these guys have, but intuitively I knew that, information or even how you interpret, you can dismiss it now. Placebo, nocebo, these are words we use when we don't understand what's happening. But now we understand that something very fundamental is happening with information and how we interpret information. And where is information? It's in consciousness, nowhere else. So, I can't help going back to my fascination with what is reality. Why do we exist? We have created all these models for existence, but like you, the more I study these models, the more confused I get too. So this book is not about any revelation. It's about enlarging the conversation more than anything else. I think the conversation needs to be expanded to beyond simple materialism, which has failed us, to tell you the truth.
All right, thanks. Okay. Back to, so Jack, now I think we've set you up for your favorite interpretation of quantum mechanics. And at some point, either maybe in your answer, but I can also have a follow-up question, talking about how quantum mechanics relates to information as something that might be fundamental to reality.
Sure. So let me preface this by saying that especially in regard to biological systems and even the human mind, I think that something is missing in our conversation, because people who talk about quantum mechanics and biology, quantum biology, they always refer to things like, single particle experiments, very simple, almost rudimentary aspects of quantum mechanics, where you have a photon striking an electron and then the electron changes the direction, and in physics we can follow these kinds of events. In biology, at least for the foreseeable future, this is not achievable. We're not at this level of resolution, let alone precision. But so I think in terms of statistical aspects of quantum mechanics, the consequences for many particle systems, which is even a single cell will have trillions of atoms in it, and therefore, if we translate quantum mechanics literally into such systems, I think we are risking a very naive approach. And I think a better approach is to look at, let's say, consequences in terms of what happens for the entire system, like a cell or maybe a tissue or organism, if we assume that the underlying physics is based on quantum principles. So that kind of actually frees me from the interpretation, because I jump right into statistical or quantum statistics. And that is, by the way, what happened with quantum metabolism, because it's based on the thinking that was used in about 1935 or so to explain the specific heats of solids at low temperatures. And Einstein, by the way, is one of the instances where he was wrong. He assumed that all the solids composed of independent quantum oscillators, and that led to an incorrect answer to that question. So he's at least once he was wrong in his life, and instead Debye corrected this, and he said, no, these oscillators are connected by little quantum springs, and they create waves. And when you look at the wave distribution of these waves, the properties of the quantum waves, then you get the right answer, which is experimentally demonstrated. It was for some time already. And I think that's kind of a better approach to biology from the quantum standpoint. Look for examples of collective behavior, which is not explainable by linear billiard ball type of collisions, but something which is collective. And that's kind of leads us directly to the book, where we really emphasize on the collective behavior of the human body, the systems. They are not independent. It's all interconnected. And that's also links to mind-body connection that Deepak mentioned as fundamental to our health, and even deeper to microbiota, body-mind connection, and of gut-brain axis. All these things cannot be mechanistically explained by these domino-like effects. It would be too slow, and we are actually much better organized than that. So, to answer your question, because I come from this point of view where quantum statistical explanations are linked directly to experiment, I like the Copenhagen interpretation because it's probabilistic, and probabilities lead to statistics. And everything else from I would say, naive, perhaps, maybe not sophisticated enough point of view is a little bit overthinking it. So if you just, I remember when I was a student, our professor, we were trying to come up with all kinds of, ingenious ideas about quantum mechanics, and the professor said, stop it, just do it. In other words, write it down, solve the equation, and then you'll be happy with that. But yeah, the Copenhagen interpretation, I think, withstood the test of time. I don't see anything which is better than that. There are all kinds of exotic things, the pilot waves, Bohmian, and there is multiverse. I'm a nuts and bolts physicist, so I like the simplest possible explanation.
You're expressing the view that is commonly known as "shut up and calculate." I took a course in quantum mechanics a couple of years ago, and that my professor was too polite to put it that way, but he basically said, "Just do your homework, figure out how to solve these equations, and don't worry about what all this means."
The underlying what I really like about quantum mechanics is how elegant it is mathematically, and also how it reflects classical mechanics. The Hamilton's equations formulation of classical mechanics. You can see the same concepts translate into quantum. That to me is very convincing, because beauty, if something is beautiful, it must be true. To me, at least.
All right, thank you. All right, Brian, I've been saving a big question for you. Somebody has already mentioned free will, and I know free will is important to you. It's very important to me. I've been writing about free will for a really long time. There's a lot of discussion of free will right now because Robert Sapolsky, the Stanford neurobiologist, just wrote this book, Determined. And meanwhile, there's another neuroscientist, Kevin Mitchell, who's written a book that could be called Anti-Determined. So Sapolsky says no free will. And this other guy, Kevin Mitchell, looks at much of the same science and says there definitely is free will. So Brian, what's your take on free will and whether it relates to quantum mechanics?
Well, thank you, John. Robert Sapolsky is this book that you're referring to is he says that none of our behaviors, actions, and decisions are voluntary or or by choice, but rather they're predetermined, right? By genetics or the environment, biological factors in the environment, essentially saying that we have no free will. Now, I can accept that in some cases of an impaired or deranged consciousness where we do harm to ourselves and others. But I reject this notion that all of our actions are inescapably deterministic, because consciousness is an awareness of perspectives, a healthy consciousness that allows creative insights and thus flexibility in what we do. Now, even my involuntary, felt like an involuntary decision to write this medicine and this metabolism tome that it spanned a tortuous 10 years. That was the epitome of free will, even though I thought it was it was involuntary at the time. But let me just give some perspective on my thinking of free will. Now, what's most inspiring and important in life is not what you do; it's why you do it. It's knowing how our motivations and free will are beneficial to ourselves and to others, and understanding and believing what is our cause. This is physiological purpose, which equates to free will or willpower. They're the same. They're the motivated not only for the acquisition of food, for which the brain principally evolved, but for many modern day vitalizing challenges, such as winning a sports competition or an academic accomplishment or a service for the community. Now, free will is the essence of what we are. And many of the challenges of free will are metaphorically tantamount to survival. But fortunately, we're entangled in a world motivated by physiological purpose, not just to survive as individuals, but to help others do so as well, to promote the joys, the opportunities, the health and general welfare of others, which are inextricably entangled to those of our own. Now, when you reach down and lift others up, you lift yourselves even more. And I believe that this is rooted in a biophysical process of quantum entanglement that connects everything in the universe. I know Deepak agrees with this. And it's interesting that Albert Einstein said, you do something good comes back to you. It may be in a day, it may be in 100 years. Now, this could be karma, this could be Newton's third law. But I think this quantum entanglement is more fundamental than that. It's the 2022 Nobel Prize winning experiment of quantum entanglement that by three physicists, there's a Clauser, Aspect, and Salinger. They looked at these electron pairs and separated the pair miles apart, with each having a separate spin, and flipped the spin on one and the other instantaneously flipped. If free will is the quantum biological expression of consciousness, right? Then plausibly, this is arguably, that the free will of somebody that you helped in many years ago would be responsible for others coming to help you with a major challenge today. And similarly, you helping somebody today would come back and help you many years from now, perhaps in another lifetime. And I just find that to be fascinating. And free will is something that doesn't age, and it's the ultimate part of our consciousness that connects the physiological perfection. I mean, if you're playing a football, and I want to look at the 2007 New York Giants that beat the 18-0 New England Patriots.
Patriots.
They were absolutely unbeatable, right? You had, I think, a 9-7 team that beat this team. And that ball, that touchdown winning catch by Plexico Burress from Eli Manning, those 300-pound linemen said, they said, that ball is in the air so long, we thought we could run down and catch the ball. And what that says to me is you're not, the minute the present becomes the past, you're living in the past. But now this is a quantum manifestation of consciousness, free will, and metabolism that drives the physiological perfection, not only of the individual, but between individuals in this phase locking phenomenon, which is, I just think that is a beautiful example, right? And
as a Giants fan, I love the connection of quantum mechanics to what I think is the greatest football game of all time, which is the New York Giants defeating the Tom Brady Patriots. So yeah, thumbs up to that.
If I may, can I just add two thoughts to it?
Yeah.
So the first one is, when I teach biophysics, I always ask students what they think is the difference between living systems and non-living systems, because we talk about biology and physics. And physical systems follow the forces. Basically, the forces, Newton's laws, second Newton's law, tell us what will happen, right? In the classical sense anyway. But biological systems decide where they want to go. Even a single bacterium, you will not be able to guess the movement of bacterium a priori. So all of life, in my opinion, is based on free will to some, so that's kind of a distinctive feature of biological systems. And the second comment I want to make is based on what Brian just said, and maybe Deepak would be interested in writing another book. Follow up to this one would be not quantum body, but quantum society or quantum planet, maybe, because these examples give us this connectivity, which either metaphorically or literally is a hallmark of quantum behavior.
I just wanted to point out that we're nearing the 1 hour mark, and I wanted to ask a kind of big question. I wanted to put this to Deepak. This is a very difficult time in human history. People are very frightened. A lot of people are in despair. I think one reason why the free will deniers are so persuasive right now is because many people feel helpless. And Deepak, I just wonder if one of the goals of writing your book was to counteract that sense of fatalism and despair by presenting this physics-based way of looking at the human condition that is more hopeful.
Yes, the short answer is yes. I just came back from the Kingdom of Bhutan, where I was at the invitation of the king and the queen, and they've parceled out a piece of land about the size of Singapore, the country of Singapore, and based totally on the idea of the awakened mind, following the principles of compassion, loving kindness, joyful equanimity. And this is what they want to create, a whole country around this. And I think now at this moment, the time of despair is basically that: climate change, a non-sustainable biosphere, even our own biology, social economic injustice, war, terrorism, and mechanized ways of killing each other. It's happening in Ukraine, it's happening in the Middle East. When I went to the Kingdom of Bhutan, I saw the celebrative mind there, celebrating existence and grateful for only one thing, that we exist and that we have the awareness that we exist. For me, that is a worthwhile endeavor to take society in the direction of a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. And maybe the quantum mechanical model is the right model, maybe it's not. When I was debating Richard Dawkins in Mexico, I quoted Freeman Dyson. I have his book here, Infinite in All Directions. And, in the book, Freeman Dyson says, every quantum experiment forces the atom to make a choice. That's the quote I used. It's a well-known quote of Freeman Dyson. But Richard screamed at me. He said he couldn't have said that. If he said it, he was wrong and he should sue you. So I wrote an email to Freeman Dyson and copied Richard on it. I said, I quoted you. Did I make a mistake? And he said, no, you didn't make a mistake, but there are 3 riddles. And I'd like to end this conversation with these 3 riddles because we'd run out of time. He said, 3 riddles that have occupied me all my life. Number 1, the unpredictable movement of atoms and particles. He didn't say random. He said unpredictable. Big difference. Okay, unpredictable to me, maybe not random inherently. Like going to Grand Central Station, seeing everybody randomly walk here, but every particle or every human is going to a certain destination. So number 1, the unpredictable movement of particles and atoms. Number 2, a universe fine-tuned for mind and consciousness. And number 3, our own consciousness. I don't know the answers to these riddles, but I have a feeling they're connected. So I think, if anything, if this book can expand the conversation, we're not trying to solve any mystery. It's not solvable. I don't think the mystery of our existence, or even the awareness of the mystery of our existence, is solvable. But any model that expands that conversation to help create a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world is worth it.
Thank you so much. That's a great way to end. And best of luck, all of you, with this book. I really think it's great, and I think it's going to find a big audience, and it should, because it's something that people need out there. So thank you for writing it.
Thank you, John.
Good job.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, comment, and share. You can also visit deepakchopra.com for upcoming events, news, and books.